Imagine this. You're scrolling through your feed late at night, heart pounding from the day's chaos, when suddenly a tale unfolds that hits you right in the gut. A billionaire's world shattered in an instant, secrets buried in the shadows of luxury, and a twist that will make you question everything you thought you knew about family, betrayal, and redemption. If you're in the USA or UK, craving stories that grip you like a blockbuster thriller mixed with raw human emotion, hit that subscribe button now. Don't miss out on more edge-of-your-seat narratives that'll keep you up way past bedtime, because once you start, you won't stop. Subscribe today and join the thousands who've discovered the power of stories that change how you see the world. Alexander Hargrove had always been a man of steel nerves and golden opportunities, a self-made billionaire whose empire spanned from Wall Street skyscrapers to Silicon Valley startups. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight that awaited him on that fateful evening as he pulled his sleek black limousine into the driveway of his sprawling estate in the hills of Beverly Hills. The sun dipping low and casting long shadows over the manicured lawns and marble fountains that symbolized his unyielding success. It had been months since he'd last set foot in his home, his travels taking him across oceans to seal deals that added zeros to his already obscene bank account, leaving behind a life he barely recognized anymore, one filled with echoes of a marriage long dissolved and a daughter he loved but scarcely knew. As the chauffeur opened the door, Alexander stepped out, his tailored suit crisp despite the jet lag, his mind already racing ahead to the board meetings tomorrow. But something felt off. The house was too quiet, the usual hum of activity absent, and as he ascended the grand staircase to the upper balcony where his 5-year-old daughter, Lily, often played under the watchful eye of the staff, his heart skipped a beat. There, silhouetted against the twilight sky, was the black maid, Alara Thompson, a woman he'd hired years ago on a whim after her impeccable references caught his assistant's eye. But now she was clutching Lily tightly to her chest, the child's small arms wrapped around her neck in a desperate embrace, tears streaming down both their faces as if the world was ending right there on that balcony. Alexander froze, his world tilting on its axis. What was this? Why was Alara holding his daughter like that? Was Lily hurt? His mind flashed to worst-case scenarios. Kidnapping, accident, something sinister lurking in the shadows of his opulent life. What the hell is going on here? He barked, his voice echoing across the estate, startling them both as Alara turned, her dark eyes wide with a mix of fear and defiance. Lily burying her face deeper into Alara's shoulder, whispering "Mommy," in a voice so soft yet piercing that it cut through Alexander like a knife. Mommy? The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Impossible, absurd. Lily's mother had died in childbirth, or so he'd been told, a tragic loss that had hardened him further, turning him into the absentee father who sent lavish gifts from afar, but rarely his presence. Alara straightened, her grip on Lily unyielding, and in that moment, Alexander saw it. The resemblance, subtle but undeniable. The curve of Lily's nose, the warmth in her eyes, traits that didn't come from him or his late wife, but from this woman he'd dismissed as mere help. "Mr. Hargrove," Alara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We need to talk. Now." As he stepped closer, the balcony seeming to shrink around them, Alexander's mind reeled back to 6 years ago, to a stormy night in New York when he'd been young and reckless, drowning his sorrows in a downtown bar after a brutal business betrayal, where he'd met a beautiful aspiring artist named Alara, her laughter like music amidst the chaos, leading to a passionate one-night stand that he'd forgotten by morning, chalking it up to the haze of whiskey and ambition. But Alara hadn't forgotten. She'd carried the secret alone, discovering her pregnancy weeks later, terrified of the powerful man who'd vanished without a trace, choosing instead to build a life on her own until fate, or perhaps desperation, led her to apply for the maid position in his household, a way to be close to the child she'd given up for adoption, only to learn that Alexander's wife, infertile and desperate, had arranged a private adoption, claiming the baby as her own in a web of lies that now unraveled before his eyes. "She's mine," Alara whispered, "our daughter." And as Lily looked up at him with those familiar eyes, Alexander felt the ground give way, his empire meaningless in the face of this revelation. But little did he know, this was just the beginning of a labyrinth of twists that would drag him into a world of corporate espionage, hidden enemies, and a love he never knew he needed. The confrontation on the balcony stretched into the night, Alexander demanding answers while Alara, with Lily now asleep at her arms, recounted the painful truth. How she'd been a struggling painter in Harlem, how their night together had been more than fleeting for her. But upon realizing she was pregnant, she'd panicked, knowing a man like Alexander would either deny it or crush her under legal might. Instead, she'd reached out anonymously, only to be intercepted by his wife, Victoria, who, in her own desperation for a child after years of failed IVF, had orchestrated a secret adoption, paying Alara a hush-money sum that barely covered her silence and heartbreak. Victoria had passed Lily off as her own, even faking pregnancy photos and hospital records with the help of a corrupt doctor, all while Alexander, buried in work, never questioned the details. But Victoria's death in a suspicious car accident 2 years later, ruled as suicide but always nagging at Alexander's subconscious, had left gaps, and now Alara, hired under a false last name to avoid detection, had been watching over Lily from the shadows, her maternal bond too strong to sever completely. "I couldn't stay away," Alara confessed, tears glistening under the balcony lights. "And when I saw the job opening, it was like destiny." Alexander paced, his phone buzzing with ignored calls from associates. But for once, business could wait. Rage boiled within him at Victoria's deception, at his own blindness. But beneath it simmered something unfamiliar. Guilt, and perhaps attraction rekindled as he looked at Alara, no longer the maid, but a woman of fierce intelligence and beauty. Yet, as the moon rose higher, a shadow moved in the garden below, a figure watching them, binoculars glinting, and Alexander's instincts kicked in, pulling Alara and Lily inside, locking the doors as paranoia set in. Who was that? Paparazzi? Or something more sinister? The next morning, over a tense breakfast where Lily shyly called Alara Annie to mask the truth for now, Alexander's private investigator, Marcus, arrived with preliminary findings. Alara's story checked out. DNA samples secretly taken confirming paternity. But there was more. Victoria's accident wasn't suicide. Traces of foul play, brake lines tampered with, pointing to his business rival, Harlan Crow, a cutthroat competitor who'd lost billions in a deal Alexander had stolen. Harlan had known about Lily's true origins, using it as leverage, perhaps even engineering Victoria's death to destabilize Alexander. "He's coming for you," Marcus warned, and now that Alara's back in the picture, she'll be a target too. Alexander's world, once a fortress of wealth, now felt like a house of cards. And as he glanced at Alara teaching Lily to draw in the sunroom, a protective urge surged through him, one that would lead him down a path of vengeance, an unexpected alliance. Determined to protect his newfound family, Alexander dove into action, mobilizing his resources to fortify the estate. Security cameras upgraded, guards doubled, and a discreet paternity announcement planned to legitimize Lily's heritage without scandal. But Alara resisted, her pride as an independent woman clashing with his controlling nature. "I don't need your money or your pity," she argued in heated whispers late at night, their conversations laced with unresolved tension from that long-ago encounter. Sparks flew, not just of anger, but of chemistry, as memories resurfaced. Her touch, her laugh, and Alexander found himself drawn to her in ways that complicated everything. Meanwhile, Harlan Crow lurked in the background, his own empire crumbling under investigations Alexander had initiated, but Harlan wasn't one to go quietly. He leaked whispers to the tabloids, hinting at Alexander's secret love child with the help, turning the story into a media frenzy that had reporters camping outside the gates. Lily, confused by the chaos, clung to Alara more, her innocent questions, "Why is Daddy angry?" piercing Alexander's heart, forcing him to confront his absenteeism. In a bold move, he took them to his private island retreat off the coast of Malibu, a paradise of white sands and turquoise waters, hoping for respite. But even there, danger followed. A yacht explosion nearby, dismissed as an accident, But Alexander knew better. Harlan's doing a warning shot. On the island, away from prying eyes, Ilara and Alexander's walls crumbled. Over candlelit dinners, she shared her art, vibrant paintings of urban life that captured her soul, and he opened up about his lonely climb to the top, the orphan boy who'd built an empire to fill the void. Their first kiss under the stars reignited the passion, but guilt shadowed it. Was this real or born of crisis? Lily's joy at seeing them together warmed them, yet twists loomed. A hidden letter from Victoria, discovered in a safe, revealing she'd known about Harlan's threats and had been blackmailing him, her death perhaps a hit to silence her. Alexander confronted Harlan at a high-stakes gala in London, the two titans clashing amid champagne and whispers, Harlan sneering. "You think you can play house now? That Maid's your weakness." But Alexander, with Ilara's quiet strength bolstering him, turned the tables, exposing Harlan's embezzlement via hack files. Wait, no, through legal channels, his team uncovering fraud that led to Harlan's arrest. Yet, just as victory seemed near, the biggest twist struck. Ilara wasn't who she seemed. During a routine background deepened by Marcus, anomalies surfaced. Ilara's struggling artist past was a facade. She was actually Dr. Ilara Vance, a brilliant geneticist who'd gone undercover after whistleblowing on a pharmaceutical giant involved in unethical experiments. Harlan's company no less. Their night together? Not random. She'd targeted Alexander, knowing his influence could help her expose the corruption. But the pregnancy was unintended, leading her to vanish and later infiltrate his home to protect Lily from the same dangers that hunted her. "I used you," she admitted tearfully on the island balcony, mirroring their first shocking encounter. "But I fell in love with our daughter, and now, with you." Alexander reeled, betrayal again. But seeing her vulnerability, the scars from her past fights, he chose forgiveness, realizing her actions had saved them all. Together, they dismantled Harlan's network, testifying in court where Ilara's evidence sealed his fate, 20 years for corporate crimes and Victoria's murder. Media hailed Alexander as a reformed mogul, but the real change was personal. He stepped back from the empire, delegating to trusted aides, prioritizing family. Ilara moved in not as maid, but as partner, her art studio overlooking the balcony where it all began, Lily thriving with two parents who adored her. Twists faded into peace, but one final surprise. Ilara pregnant again, this time planned, a new chapter in their unconventional love story. Years later, as Lily grew into a confident teen, Alexander looked back on that shocking return home, grateful for the maid who clutched his daughter and his heart, turning shock into salvation.